Welcome back to the Rise interview with me, Christian Ogodo. We're live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. The Africa Day 2020 is a reminder of a continent's potential and promise to silence the gun. The Africa Union campaign on silencing the guns aims to achieve a conflict-free Africa, prevent genocide, make peace a reality for all, and rid the continent of wars, violent conflicts, human rights violations, and humanitarian disasters. All illegally acquired fight weapons used in a crime, urban violence, and cattle rustling need to be silenced too. Silencing the guns calls upon all countries to invest in peace. African leaders are rallying round to ensure that every effort is made to ensure the success of silencing the guns in the continent, as there is an inseparable connection between peace and development.
Responsibility of African Commission. It is also the responsibility of each and every country in our continent. It is also a strong signal outside the continent. Those who are still pouring more armaments in this continent and trying to militarize it. Hopefully get the understanding of everybody that enough is enough when it comes to bringing more armaments in the continent.
The African leaders have come to realize that very little of their ambitious project for Africa could be actually accomplished if they don't succeed in silencing the guns.
All these conflicts between Somalia, in South Sudan, in Libya, in the Central African Republic, they reflect deficiencies in governance. They reflect the problem which we have in Africa of managing diversity. If we can address these factors and find durable solutions, we'll be able to go on a steady path towards silencing the guns.
All right. For more on this, I've now been joined by Phil Roberts, who is the Deputy Chairman, Data Coalition, Advocacy and Campaign of the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council. Thanks for joining us on the Rise interview.
Thank you, Mr. Chris.
Silencing the guns, very apt topic or decision, you know, to bring peace to Africa and eradicate the various forms of conflicts ravaging the continent. How achievable is this by the African Union?
Okay, the African Union has been doing so much with respect to all of this because terrorism is on the rise in Africa, and a lot of terrorists move from one nation to another nation in Africa. Now, looking in Nigeria, the Boko Haram issue, cattle rustling, like all you've read, is becoming a major problem. The African Union had to put up this strategy to see how we can reduce this. Because if we don't do this, we're going to lose our Africa. Now we're celebrating the African Day, looking at what have we achieved. The AU had to put this because we have an agenda for achieving this in the next 50 years, which is AU is going to be 100 years in 2063. So we're trying to see how we can achieve all of this before that day, before that year, which is the end of the program. Now, Africa has been through a lot of issues. Corruption has also been a major challenge in fighting terrorism in Africa. Election malpractice and all of that. These are major challenges that Africa has faced, and this has been a major problem also on our economy. Now, the reason why we have so much arms in Africa is because the borders are porous. Not just Nigerian borders, African borders are porous. And we have a lot of international influence in Africa. And the only reason Africa can rise out from these challenges is to look for a strategy on how we can minimize and take out these wrong and dangerous elements in Nigeria. So that is why we're looking at silencing the guns before the year 2063.
Good proposition. But a lot of cynics would say, what exactly has the African Union and its leaders achieved? Because poverty is rising. And why is there so much violence in Africa? It's because of the disenchantment of the people, the youths, the men and women who are supposed to, you know, be gainfully engaged in one vocation or the other are not. And the riches of the continent are squandered by a few.
I think you just said all of that, and these are major challenges in which the African Union has been facing in recent years. Don't forget that the African Union was actually called the OAU and all of that before they started and looking at how can we see how we can take Africa from where it is now. The major problem Africa has had as our leaders is not a problem of one African nation. It's becoming a problem of all the African nations. And that is why the African Union had to look deep and say, how can we reduce most of these things you've said? We have a lot of challenges like immigration. A lot of people are moving out of Africa to some of these countries for greener pastures. And don't forget that these countries are also moving into Africa to take from us. Why? Because these countries have sold their nations as the best in the world, while Africa is demarketing Africa. So that is why the African Union put up a lot of strategies to see how we can promote our own Africa, sell it to the outside world, the outside African continent, in a way that they're going to understand that Africa, the Africa we have today, is a new Africa, and the change that we want to see in Africa is going to start from us. So that is why the African Union is doing so much to see how we can silence the guns, because our focus for this year till to 2063, like I said, is to see how we can reduce terrorism. Because if you reduce terrorism, you're going to reduce trafficking. If you reduce trafficking, you're going to reduce cybercrime. If you reduce cybercrime, you're going to reduce a lot of people that travel out of Africa, seeking out for green pastures out of Africa.
Well, it's still not a blueprint that you've reeled out to achieve in another 50 or so years when Africa...
There is a roadmap.
When Africa is going to be... the African Union is going to be 100 years. But what kind of economic promotion is the African Union doing when it would allow a foreign country to build its headquarters in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, or where countries have now been selling off their economic rights, as we see in Zambia and other countries, with the wicked loans that they collect from the Chinese?
Okay, we had the discussion today at the office, and we're actually looking at why is it that a lot of these countries want to give Africa loans. Now it's because they've seen so many potentials in Africa. Now I don't think I'm in the right.
What, do you talk about potentials? 57 years of coming together, you're still talking of potentials. If that's a human being, he would be going to, you know, striding for the next century. Yeah. So why do we keep saying potentials at 57?
Yeah, I think I don't want to go back to the reason why African Union is celebrating the African Day, which we'll call it silencing the guns, because what you just mentioned is part of the major problem.
Yeah, I'm talking, yes, it's part of the problem, but I'm looking at a kind of recolonialism is taking place in Africa.
African Union...
In the 21st century, Africa, or modernity?
Then we're going to ask ourselves, who is Africa? We are Africans. And African Union has their policy, they have their roadmap, and a lot of African countries are under the Union. And I think it's left for the various governments of our various nations in Africa to key into what the African Union is doing. Even in this COVID-19, I know there was a joint effort from the African Union that was rolled out for other nations to follow. And they followed it. And even I think Nigeria was the first that kickstarted the African Union policy for fighting COVID-19. So if countries can move into some of the economic policies that African Union is bringing out, why wouldn't they also move into some of those various concepts and ideas and policies that has been discussed in the various African Union meetings and all of that? So I don't think African Union is to be blamed for countries not moving into what has been discussed.
If you say so, then it just means that the African Union, you know, as a uniting or unifying factor for the
African
continent
continent?
does not have that kind of influence to, propel the continent forward. I just talked about the issue of re-colonialism by some of the powers, and I mentioned particularly the Chinese. Economic colonialism is a big issue.
Like I said before, I'm not in the position to discuss that. But like I mentioned,
But you are in the
Africans-
position, you are, sorry, look at what you are. You are the deputy chairman, data coalition, advocacy and campaigns for, excuse me, for African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council.
COVID-19 response team. And that is why we had to put this team together to see how we can put up a lot of advocacies for various governments of the nations to come into some of the policies that the African Union is pushing. We established this COVID-19 response team in different countries to see how we can make sure people in Africa move towards what the African Union is trying to achieve. Because like I said, a lot of countries have their policies. A lot of countries also have the way they run. The African Union is a union that houses a lot of these nations. And I was watching TV yesterday, and I was seeing the Ghanaian president. He was talking on TV when he was like, they have decided that they want to stop taking funds from the France government. And that is a good step in the right direction. They want to start moving and developing their own economy so that other nations will come and also borrow from them. And that is what our economic team is also looking at. We're looking at pushing a lot of things in this COVID-19 period, where after the COVID-19, our economy is not going to sink. African Union countries are not going to be borrowing and depending on the Chinese, just like as you have said. So I think after this period, with the policies that the African Union has put together by bringing us on board, a lot of these advocacies will be brought out, and Africa is going to stop borrowing.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you so much.
We look forward to seeing that. You're still watching the Arise interview. We've still got more still ahead. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Arise interview. We're live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. I am Christian Ogodan. We still have Phil Roberts, who is the Deputy Chairman, Data Coalition, Advocacy and Campaigns, or the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council, COVID-19.
Response team.
Well, you seem to be hinging, you and the union, hinging all your hopes on, of course, the new normal that the COVID-19 is bringing to the world, right?
Yeah.
So, put on the table, what are those things that you want to use to regenerate the African continent?
First of all, our job in the COVID-19 response team is to demarket COVID. Then secondly, there's a life after COVID-19. So we're looking at post-COVID. What is Africa looking at in the next years after post-COVID? Now, economy of a lot of countries are falling down, and Africa is there have been a lot of thoughts that Africa was going to be well affected in COVID, but look at where we are right now. And there's been a lot of lockdown in different African nations. Now, this has also affected the economy of these nations. We had to put up this COVID response team to see how we can, first of all, like I said, demarket COVID. We can let people also know that, yes, there's COVID, but this is what you can do to make sure that you don't get COVID, even if we are celebrating that we are not the worst hit. But this is what we need to do to make sure we are not hit by COVID.
But the mortuaries in Nigeria, in some states, are already getting filled because of deaths arising from COVID?
We have, that is what we hear in the news. We in the COVID response team, we are not the government. So what we do, Mr. Chris, is to try to see how we can keep doing our job to advocate, because our job is advocacy and campaigns. We're putting up different campaign structures, different adverts on social media and all of that. warning people on the danger of COVID, and also trying to let people know that there are other forms of businesses you can do in the post-COVID. There are a lot of stuff you can also do while the COVID-19 is here to grow your business, because people shouldn't see the COVID as a death sentence. That's why the silencing the guns also plays a vital role. We want to see how we can silence the guns of COVID. COVID is becoming like a natural disaster. COVID is bigger than the AK-47 from our own point of view. So we want to see how we can use the African Day to also see how we can silence the death traps that COVID has brought into Africa. So we in Africa, we right here in Nigeria, in the AU ECOSOC Nigeria response team, we visited even the Gwagalada specialist isolation center. We visited them, and we are also looking at, a lot of people have been calling us to tell us that they have different cures for the coronavirus, they have testing, black kits and all of that. But what we also try to do is to say, okay, this is what you have. Let it go through the government of the day, because we are under the constitution of the federal government. So our team is to see how we can get anything that can help demarket COVID, anything that we can help to let people know, educate people that this is what COVID is all about. You need to wash your hands, you need to use hand sanitizer, you need to put on your face masks and all of that. So make sure that we don't increase the death rate in COVID. We don't also increase the coronavirus cases in Nigeria. So we are doing our own bits. And don't forget, it's everybody's business. So we are just stepping into the game to see how we can make a difference and make more noise right here in Nigeria.
Well, you're stepping into what I'll call very big shoes here.
You can say that, Mr. Christian. It's not been easy. Our visit to the isolation center was really dramatic.
Okay.
It was really dramatic. And the African Union ECOSOC want to also use the opportunity to celebrate all medical, all our health workers that has been doing so much. Fantastic job they were doing there at the...
Absolutely.
Yeah, we saw them, and these guys are in high spirits, the doctors and all that. And the AU ECOSOC COVID response team is really proud of them. And we'll keep doing our best to support.
Okay, let's look at silencing the guns again. Of course, you've talked about terrorism, one violence breeding the others and the rest, and the mismanagement of the wealth of the continent and the rest. What kind of advocacy are you taking to the leaders there to tell them that, look, they must look inwards? Africa has more than potentials to really grow.
Now we're going to take it from Nigeria. Now our team, like today, we had some media programs where we spoke on radio and several platforms, where we try to explain to people the reason why we are doing this program to silence the guns. Because the level of hunger in Africa is rising, the level of financial
impoverishment.
So many problems. And a lot of all these things, many people will say, oh, our leaders are the problem. Our leaders are the problem. These leaders they were like you some day ago. They only got into power and they became what they are today. So there must be a system of checkmate. Like in Nigeria, we know the EFCC and the ICPC is doing so much in fighting corruption. In Africa today, everybody thinks corruption, because everybody thinks corruption is the problem that has brought us to this level. But
don't you think so? Do you have a contrary view?
Corruption has played a major role, but before those guys got to office, there were some tendencies there are some characteristics of corruption that they have shown. How come we didn't see them? The guy from INEC just left here, and I know INEC has been doing so much on advocacy and voter education, blah, 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 blah. The reason for INEC doing all of those is to educate you and I, to make sure that you need to vote in the right person before he gets into power, take over power, bring your economy down, and bring you into poverty. So whoever you're going to be voting into an office has to play a major role in the life and destiny of every country. So that's why most times when we talk about corruption, I look and as I say, before this person got into that position, didn't you know him? Didn't you see the traces? Didn't you see his characteristics? And you voted him. So a lot of people have brought people into government for their own selfish reasons. So that's why most times I scarcely talk about corruption. All I need to say, while I tell people, is that even if they are corrupt, let's also have a strategy that holds our leaders accountable. Until we can do that, to have a system that can hold leaders accountable, we can go nowhere in Nigeria or in Africa. So the best thing we're going to be doing in this period is to see how we can make a lot of, we're designing different advocacy programs, materials, media, whatever, just like as I'm here now, we're talking about educating people on getting the right leaders, educating people on you to know when to speak. There are when to speak and when not to speak. Somebody can be in government and maybe the person is misusing the funds. There are ways to talk to that person. You don't speak to that person, you want to fight him and all of that, even if you're in a position. There are diplomatic ways of handling issues. So we'll also try to let our people know, especially the young people, to know that before anybody comes to power, there are steps, there are organs and phases that need to be put on ground to checkmate these people before they get into power, so that we'll vote in the right people. So the AU ECOSOC here in Nigeria, our job is to, my office, campaign, advocacies, we speak for good governance, a new Africa, growth, and all of that. So that's what we're going to be doing.
So that new Africa, in another 43 years or so,
yeah,
you think Africa would have become a world continental body to be reckoned with?
There's a slogan we've been pushing. My boss in the office, Honorable Tunji, who is the African Nigerian rep for AU, we've been pushing a slogan that will say, the African you want. What is the Africa you want? Do you want an Africa where tomorrow you see your children still dying? Do you want an Africa where you see lots of migration? Do you want an Africa where we don't have jobs? Do you want an Africa where we see a lot of people taking what belongs to those people? So every African needs to design the Africa he or she wants. So when you design that, we can move to advocacies. Hey, you can't do that alone. Ambassador Robert can't do that alone. The ECOSOC can't do that alone. Dr. Tunji can't do that alone. But the Africa you want is the Africa you're going to see. So no matter who is there as your president, no matter who is there as your community leader, no matter who is there as your governor, or
Africa that is still dependent on entry visas to majority of the countries, Africa that does not have one single monetary unit. Well, sorry, Philip Roberts.
The Africa you want.
So unfortunate that there isn't enough time for us. Philip Roberts is the Deputy Chairman, Data Coalition, Advocacy and Campaigns for the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council COVID-19. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Well, that's it for this edition of the Rise interview. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye and thanks for watching.